At first I was thinking of it in an academic way, that you can only think in a language that we master. And that's a difficult thing for us to kind of get our heads around. But like, when you're a small child, and like you were saying, we learn language because of imitation. And as we hear people refer to a word, like, why is this called a marker? Well, because someone referred to it as a marker. And then one day it might occur to us, after calling it marker for a long time, that the reason it's called a marker is because, what does it do? It marks. And you're like, oh, duh. And I wonder if there are words like that you hear them, and then after using them for years, you kind of go, marker, marks, oh, that's why it's called that. But there are a lot of words that don't have a meaning within them. Like, for example, your name doesn't have a meaning in it. Your name means something, but it couldn't possibly, like, for example, my name, Stephen, it means crown. Now, is there anything about me that suggests that I'm of a crown in some way? No, it's just, yeah. My mom said that, my mom said when I was a baby, he's going to be a king, so she gave me this name, Crown. But there's nothing about my personality that's reflected in my name. In other words, what we'd say there is that the language is non-informative. The word doesn't inform you about the object that it represents. Whereas a marker, the name is informative. There is something there that represents the object. Reflects the object that it represents. And so what that therefore means is that if you're trying to describe your emotions, and let's say that the only words that you have available to you are happy and sad. Happy and sad. Okay. Now, let's see. You win the lottery. $100 million. How do you feel? Happy. Okay. You're walking down the street, you notice a quarter, and so you pick up the quarter. How do you feel? Happy. See the problem there? You feel the same way about finding a quarter as you do about winning $100 million? You fall in love with somebody. How do you feel? Sad. Hopefully happy. Hopefully happy. So you feel the same way about finding a quarter as you feel about winning $100 million as you feel about falling in love. Well, no, but you don't have any other words to describe the thing that you're feeling. So in a strange way, it makes it difficult to feel the thing that you're feeling because you don't have the words to describe it. And because you don't have the words to describe it, you can't think about it. It's difficult to think about things. So for example, if I said to you, don't use words, but think about the sun. Maybe you'll have an image of the sun in your head. But now if you start trying to think about the properties of the sun, you can't do that without language. In other words, even if I said to you, think about the sun, you might be using the word sun to think about this object that's up in the sky. But if you don't have access to the word sun, it becomes very difficult to think about it. If you don't have access to words, it becomes very difficult to consider that it's a ball of plasma that's out there in the universe if you don't have access to those words. In other words, the richer your vocabulary, the richer your access to language, the more richly you're able to process and understand the universe and the world around you. And that's a very academic way of looking at it. And he does mean it in this way. In other words, if you don't have access to the words ecstatic or joyful or, beside myself, then you don't have access to be able to describe the differences between finding a quarter, winning $100 million, falling in love. It all becomes almost the same thing. And that significantly narrows your breadth of experience, your possible levels of experience. We don't think of it that way. We think like, well, no, I can still experience those things, not quite the same way because you can't process it. Part of life is doing the thing. The other part of life is being able to process and understand the thing that you're experiencing. And that's a hard thing for us to get our heads around, but it's absolutely true. If you remember, gosh, way back last year, we talked about, in Spanish, how would I tell you that I love you? Te quiero y te amo. Two very different ways of saying it. And they mean different things. Now, in English, we don't have two. We've just got the one. Love. I love buffalo wings. I love my mom. Love your sister. Maybe you love your significant other. Hopefully you love your sister and your significant other differently. Unless you're from Kentucky, right? So hopefully those are different forms of love. And then I talked, if you remember, about in Greek, you've got various forms of love. but those various forms of love help shape your understanding of what love is. In English, for example, you may find yourself falling in love one day, getting married, and then you may find yourself sitting around a table with a good friend 10 years afterwards and go, it's hard to explain, like, it's like, I love them, but I don't know if I feel like I'm in love. I don't know, things have just changed. And then your friend will sit there and go, I understand. And you're like, I'm not sure what to do. And your friend will say, do what makes you happy. I almost pulled what's left of my hair out during the break a little bit ago, because one of my former students came to me and she's struggling to figure out which college she should go to. And she wants to study something very specific, and she has that class right now. That is the specific thing she wants to study. So I asked her, what did your, so-and-so, your instructor say? And she said, they told me to do what makes me happy. And I'm like, ugh. People are coming to you for advice because they don't know what's going to make them happy. And neither do you. Maybe you know better what a person should do. In other words, what's the right thing to do, whether it makes you happy or not. Maybe you can give some insight into that. But the idea is that a person maybe has an idea of what they want to do, but they just need some reassurance to go in a direction or not, And so when we don't want to give advice, that's what we do. We throw up our hands and we're like, do what makes you happy. So maybe you're sitting with your friend and you tell them that with your significant other that you love them, but you're not sure how you feel. And that's because the thing of love has changed. When you first fall in love with somebody, there's that excitement, there's that passion. In English, we just say love. In Greek, we're going to say eros. And as time goes on, you become very, like a good, I'll say close friend with them, but you get the idea, they become like your best friend. And so when we're talking in Greek, we're going to say philo. In English, we're going to say love. And then as you get deeper into it later on, you become family, and you become almost like one person. And in Greek, we're going to say sterge. In English, we're going to say love. And then after you've been with that person for many, many years, and you're with them because you have a duty to a commitment, it's non-emotional, it's duty-based, we're going to say agape, that person in Greek. In English, we're going to say love. In other words, you have these 4 different stages. And if you feel like love is just one word of one thing that you're going to feel, well, of course, you get far into a relationship, you have sterge, but you don't have eros anymore. And so you might be like, you feel like the passion's gone, that's gone. Yeah. A bit of it, yeah. There are still signs of that, but that isn't the thing that dominates your relationship anymore. But you understand that what's been lost hasn't really been lost. It's matured into something deeper and better and stronger. So that thing is no longer there, but you don't necessarily look back on it and go, "Oh, I wish that was still there." You can still wish that was there, but you understand that you prefer what is here, not what's gone by. But if you don't understand that there are that love goes through these stages of development, it becomes very easy to get confused by how you feel and what you should do. And so, if you don't have those words, you can't think in those terms, because you just have that one word love, which becomes very confusing. It's like I don't know if this is true or not, but something that people say all the time, that the Eskimos have 500 words for snow. It depends if the snow is coming in from which direction, how big it is, how fast it's coming, what season it is, because snow is really, really important to them. If I asked you, what are the conditions like out there? Oh, it's snowing. Oh, neat. You go out there, and the snow is piled like 11 feet high, and you can't get through there, and you're snowed in. I thought you said it was snowing. It is. But you didn't tell me how much it was snowing. One word, snow. It becomes confusing. The richer your vocabulary, the more descriptive it is, the better you're able to understand the world around you. And the better able you are to understand yourself. And so you can only think if you have access to those words. That's what I originally thought. And then as you guys are talking, I'm thinking of something else now instead. That language is something that's not just something that you speak, it's something that you
I'll do your research.
no, it's also stuff that you do. Yeah, English, Spanish, Greek, German, whatever. Those are the languages that you speak, and those help you to identify the world, because that's exactly what language is. Language is your ability to describe and process and understand the world around you. Why do we study this whole language arts thing? That's why. Because the better access you have to language, and the stronger your language, the better able you are to understand the world around you. And if you don't have those skills, you can't process it. That's all it is. And so why do we use language? That's exactly what it is, to describe, to explain things to other people, to make things clear, to clarify. I get asked that question like, well, why do we have like so many words? Why are there so many synonyms? Because each one means something different. It's like if you were to go into my tool chest and go, Scan, why do you have so many wrenches? Because each wrench has its own job. They look the same, but they function the same, but they'll accomplish different things. Your synonyms are like that. They mean them. Now, of course, the problem, you might say, well, yeah, but I can use a really rich synonym and people won't understand it. That's on them, because you understand what's going on. And that's what you're trying to do, is to understand the world around you. So that's one thing. But then there are also kinds of language. Like, you guys heard of love languages before? Yeah. Yeah, that's another kind of language that's there. Because the point of language is to communicate. You can communicate how you feel. You might say, oh, I love you. But what does that mean? Love. You hold a flower. Love. Yeah, but the way that you can really communicate what you feel is by what you do. What are the languages I've seen? Time, spending time, quality time, acts of service, compliments, and there's another one, I can't remember what it is. But there's these four things, and so maybe you don't say love, or maybe you say it, but the way that you really demonstrate is by doing those things. And by the way, it's not even necessarily just your love language. If your love language is gifts, that's the other one, gifts, then, but the other person's love language is acts of service or quality time. If you give them a gift, you're speaking your own language. It's like you're speaking English, but then the other person is speaking Spanish. You can't communicate that way, kind of. You know, there's some similarities, there's some homonyms, but for the most part, you're speaking something completely different. They can't understand them. And then same thing. So then the person receives a gift from you, and rather than look at it and say, they're speaking their love language. We need to learn each other's language so we can communicate better. And instead, we just kind of expect the person, and then we get mad. We buy them gifts, and then it's like, I don't want these gifts though. God, you're so unappreciative of the gifts. It's not that they're unappreciative of the gifts. It's that you're trying to speak a language to them that's not their language. They're looking for quality time. You're giving them gifts. We can hear a lot about this, by the way, from absentee parents who buy their children stuff because they're always gone. They're always out working. We talked a little bit about this last time. So you almost like buy off the kids by giving them those things. And by the way, that sounds like a great thing to many of us. Like, well, yeah, I wish I'd trade some time with my parents for a car. You know? But I imagine that's a luxury, to say something like that is a luxury, meaning that if you have that time, it's hard to imagine what not having that time would be like. You know? And so that's a language. Empathy, how we interact with people, whether if we're empathetic with them, that's a language as well, because it's a communication method. All these things, habits, all these things are languages that we can speak. And then, of course, the ones that we don't know, the ones that we don't know. So I would suggest that unless we can speak those languages, we can't think in those ways. If that makes sense. That's why it's worthwhile to. Oh no, sorry, 10 thoughts in my head at once. Any of you guys make playlists still and share them with your friends? That's love right there, man. Playlists. Yeah, if you turn me on to new music, that's a great thing, and that tells you something. Another language is going to be improving a person, teaching them another side of the world. That's why it's so wonderful to have people who have different backgrounds from you, because then you get to live their world. In other words, if there's two of you and you guys are very much alike in your views and your backgrounds and everything, you kind of just there's value there. And the value there is that you're getting reassurance, that you're okay. What's what I'm thinking of? I'm not thinking of reassurance. It's a different one I'm thinking of. You're getting validated. Like, I have this view. So do I. Okay, at least there's two of us who have this view. Even if nobody else does, it kind of validates it that there's nothing wrong with you. I was just talking to someone about this just yesterday. There's a person who I particularly dislike. And I get the sense that lots of, when I have conversations with some people who know this person, nobody seems to like them. But then when we're in public, everyone speaks glowingly about this person. I was asking my friend, is there something wrong with me? Like, is there something wrong with how I'm seeing the world? Because when we're, one-on-one, and this person's saying, no, everyone's just kind of afraid of this person, I guess. And he goes, yeah, which is the thing. So I'm like, oh, what? Why would you be afraid? Like, what's this person going to do? Jump on you and start beating your face? Even if, I think if this person was capable, they probably would, but the person's not capable of anything like that. But, sometimes it's good to have that one friend because they can kind of validate. Now, if you have a friend who shares similar kinds of views, or at least can validate your views, but is also from enough of a different background so that you can learn how to see the world in their way, you're on your way to a best friend. In other words, when that person can introduce you to music, if music is the thing that you love, or ideas, or foods, or I already said ideas twice now. I guess you can see what's important to me. Then you understand that that's a person who actually expands who you are in your existence. Introduces you to ways of seeing, and not just seeing the world, but now once you're exposed to new ways of seeing the world, now you're challenged to develop ways to explain and describe this new world in which you've been introduced, So there's a value that's there with that. I haven't seen that in years. Literally this year. So now you're challenged to describe this new world that you've been introduced into, which means that you've got something to do, and something meaningful as well. Because, that's, like I said, that's the whole value of reading other people's writings. Because once you start to realize that how short life is, which by the way, it doesn't really matter how long life is, it's still pretty damn short. Now you realize what it's like to live other lifetimes. I've lived Nietzsche's lifetime. I understand where he's coming from. I've lived Voltaire's life. I've lived T.S. Eliot's life. All these people who I've read, all these writers, philosophers, and psychologists, and poets, and anthropologists, I've lived their lives now. Think about that. An anthropologist will go and study a tribe somewhere, or several tribes, and they'll write a book, and that is their life's work. That's the culmination of 85 years of existence. And I guess I could go learn what they learned, but it would take me 85 years. Or it can take me 2 weeks of reading their book, and now in 2 weeks I have access to 85 years of life. And now multiply that out by all the people that you read. It's one of the great things about music as well. When you listen to an artist, you have access to their life now. You know what they've lived. You know what they've gone through. That's why we'll sometimes have really deep emotional connections with people, with artists we've never met before, because you feel like a song is about you. You've never met them before. Maybe the song was recorded 20 years before you were born, but damn, you're convinced that that's about you, that you connect to it so damn well. Now you're validated, but you also have developed a way to help explain the things that you're going through, because that's what the artist has done. They've described the life that you're living in a way that you couldn't have otherwise. So now we learn something from them. So I guess what I'm saying is that that's another way that you can speak a language, is to be able to help a person describe their own experiences, help them live extra lifetime that they never would have lived otherwise, to help them explain those experiences that they've gone through, and to help them be understood. Because that's something that, that's the purpose of language, and maybe that's a big aspect of life as well, to be understood. You like that idea? Now, complex people are difficult to understand. But just because you're difficult to understand doesn't mean you're complex. You also just might be unclear. The only way that you know that, though, is to be able to explain the things that you're going through. And that's why we do what we do here, to develop that ability to do. I can't think of anything that's more valuable than that, especially not math. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticism?